premeditated and unwarned invasions. The towering crimes of the Vietnamese aggressors aroused immense hatred on the part of our people. People, old and young, were shot to death. Like fascists, they shot our womenfolk after raping them. Their brutality exceeded that of the U.S. imperialist mercenaries.
While the Khmer Rouge fumed with indignation, their own attacks across the Vietnamese border were exceptionally barbaric. Yet despite these provocations, the Vietnamese said nothing for more than a year. They were playing a waiting game. They were probing and testing the Pol Pot regime, trying to force a new border settlement while ignoring the one they'd made with Sihanouk during the war. The Khmer Rouge were easily baited. Their response to intimidation was to launch more belligerent raids. On the border issue, they would never yield. There was nothing at all to negotiate. At the end of 1977, the Vietnamese launched a punishing invasion and then withdrew. But instead of being sobered, the Khmer Rouge made a parade of prisoners and pretended to have won a great historic victory. Now they boasted that every Khmer Rouge fighter would kill 30 Vietnamese. They said they were ready to sacrifice 2 million Kampucheans in order to wipe out all 50 million of their Vietnamese neighbours. The Khmer Rouge were now consumed with paranoia.
Defeated in its military provocations, Vietnam turned to the use of agents to stage abortive coups d'etats on 6 different occasions. POW Tran Van Thuan revealed that the plan of the Communist Party of Vietnam was to set up puppet regimes at all levels of Kampuchea. From these confessions, it is evident that the Vietnamese aim at forcing Kampuchea to join an Indochina Federation dominated by Vietnam. Comrade Pol Pot pointed out that we have won initial victory, but our enemies will not be reconciled to defeat. We must be vigilant and be ready at all times to defend our motherland.
In 1978, around the time of this rally, the bloodiest purges of all were being carried out here in the eastern zone of Kampuchea. As the witch hunt for Vietnamese spies became more and more desperate, the Pol Pot regime was destroying itself from within. At least 100,000 were slaughtered because the Khmer Rouge leaders here were accused of being contaminated by the Vietnamese. Just how many died during the 3.5 years of Pol Pot's rule can never be known for sure. But estimates suggest a death toll of at least 700,000 Kampucheans, and perhaps as many as 1 million. As the one great ally and sponsor of the Pol Pot regime, China must have known of these atrocities. After the death of Mao Zedong, the Chinese had denounced and purged their own radicals, known as the Gang of Four. And yet, in the case of Kampuchea, the Chinese were committed to backing the Khmer Rouge to the bitter end. Indeed, as they warned of Vietnam's military preparations, they stepped up their deliveries of aid and war materials to bolster the Khmer Rouge.
There is no contradiction because between the Chinese internal policy and the Chinese external policy, because China mainly takes into account the Soviet danger and the Vietnamese danger. So since the Gang of Four in Cambodia, that is to say Pol Pot and Madame Pol Pot, Ieng Sari and Madame Ieng Sari, and the fifth one is Khieu Samphan, but the Khieu Samphan is just a figurehead in the hands of Pol Pot and Ieng Sari. So China has to support them because they can't bleed the Vietnamese. Their army still is strong.
The Vietnamese leaders in Hanoi had proved their military genius and refused to kowtow to China. As a matter of pride and security, they were prepared for a showdown to stake their claims over Kampuchea.